as players then, when you get a load of stats, the obvious question is, what do they all mean? So what we'll do here, we'll run through what each of the columns are with a few examples as well. What we're not going to do is give the rationale or the justification behind why we're measuring or using each of the columns, because I can put that in a link in the description, and those of you that are interested, you can go and look at it in more detail. What I want to do here is just focus on an explanation purely on what each of the columns actually means, because that's a question I get asked a lot. So hopefully this helps. We split the court into 3/3 with the yellow team kicking towards the bottom of the screen. This is the first third, this is the second third, this is the third third. In possession, 1T is exit the pressure zone, then we move through into create and maintain, and then 3T, finalize. Out of possession, it depends on your coaching philosophy. If we're trying to regain the ball high up the court, which we are at times, then it's really good to regain it in what I've called 3T. So what do they all mean? These 4 columns here are for events in that first third, closest to your own goal. So out of possession, did you regain the ball by tackling? Did you intercept a pass to regain it? Or was the ball just loose and somebody recovered it that way? Here's an example of recovering the ball via a tackle in that first third. We can also recover the ball in that first third by intercepting. So if we look here, Sam intercepts that ball to recover possession. We can also recover the ball if it's loose. So this is an example of that. So you can see there, Saeed recovered a loose ball. So Simone's throw doesn't go through to Sam here. That ball is loose though at this point, and it's Saeed that wins that loose ball back. Also, we might not regain the ball, but we might disrupt what the opposition are trying to do. So for instance, we might get a foot in and the ball goes out for a kick in. So it's still the opposition's kick in, but we've done something to disrupt the opposition. So that's what this ball disruption is. So it's going to be Calais, this player here, that's going to do it in this zone. So he's not going to win the ball back, but he does enough to disrupt the opposition's attack. Again. So we don't win possession back as the yellow team, but Kelly does just enough to stop the attack from the white team. These events for winning the ball back can obviously happen in any of the thirds. And this is an example of Gabrielle winning it back in the middle third by intercepting. So you can see that this pass wasn't really on. Is intercepted by Gabrielle in that middle third. And this is a good example of a disruption event in that middle third. So Sam doesn't win the ball back, but he does enough to disrupt what this player on the blue team is trying to do. This is a great example of winning the ball back in that final third via a tackle. And this is Sam again. These columns here relate to players losing the ball and where they're losing it. Now, clearly, it's really bad if we're losing the ball right in front of our own goal. The area on the court is really important. So, for instance, you might have a player that's losing the ball in that final third. So here, Gabriel's lost it twice. However, he's got 2 shots on target, scored 2 goals, got 2 shots off target, a shot blocked. He's got 5 shots. He's taking players on and he's 1v1s. So losing the ball twice in that final third is not really that bad a thing in context of all these other columns. Every number needs to be taken in context with everything else. There's a distinction here between players that are actually in the final third and losing possession. And for instance, for this column here, you could have a player just punt the ball long down the court. So the ball is actually lost in that final third. These columns here come back to the packing metric. And if you search that on YouTube, I've done webinars on that in the past. But briefly, this column here is how many of the opposition's players you've taken out with your passes during the game. So for instance, if we look at this example with Sully, the pass that he plays takes these 2 players out of the game. And so for that, he earns himself 2 points, which gets added on here. These are the number of points, and these are the number of times it's happened. So in this case, Sully would earn 2 points, which gets added on here, but that's one event, so you'd get a 1 added on here. And from that, if we divide this number by this number, we can actually look at the average number of players taken out by one of those passes. So he's had 5 events that have bypassed opposition players. He's taken out 10 players by that. So on average, those positive passes that he's playing are taking out 2 players with each pass. And it's interesting to profile this because some players consistently get higher numbers here in that they take out more players with their passes. Somebody has to provide the pass, but a pass also needs to be received. We'll use Gabriel as an example. Gabriel received passes that in total had gone past 26 players in the course of the game. And if we look at the ratio of pass provider to pass receiver, that gives us a profile here. And it ranges from 0 to 1. No number is better than the other. 0 is more towards a pass provider, 1 is more towards a pass receiver. So pass providers, if you've been asked to play as a fix, you're generally going to be providing the passes as opposed to receiving them. And if you're playing as a pivot, you're generally going to be receiving them as opposed to providing them. So it is governed by the role you're playing. But I've looked at this over lots of matches and players do profile somewhere on that spectrum. And I've seen it where I've asked players to play in positions that don't suit their profile. So I've got it wrong as a coach and it's helped me try and find the best position for some players. And of course you can have universals, players that are balanced between providing and receiving those passes. This column is how many players you've taken out with 1v1s. This column is travelling. So Saeed didn't need to engage a player in a 1v1, but he managed to take him out by travelling forwards with the ball. This column is different to assists. This is big chances created. So why don't we bother with assists? Well, assists are no good. So for instance, here, if I'm this player playing the ball in, I want my assist, regardless of whether this player puts the ball in the net. So if I'm this player, I want my assist. And if that ball doesn't go in, as this player, that's not my problem. I want my assist. However, an assist you only get if the player scores the goal. So this player still needs credit for playing that ball in. Hence, that's a big chance created and not an assist. And regarding this goal that Gurprit scores, I've also run this one past Ben. The $1 million question from Harry was, why didn't I get an assist for it? Well, even if we were doing assists, there's a couple of tangents which we won't go down in terms of assists. Is this a big chance? I would say not. If we're looking at XG, I wouldn't say that's a big chance striking it from there, because we've got a goalkeeper, defender on the line, defender here. So that's not a big chance. Hopefully these are self-explanatory. Shot on target and off target. Shot blocked is there's a player in the way. If someone's getting very high values here, I would question why they're shooting. Perhaps they're just consistently shooting when they ought not to be. Number of goals a player's scored, hopefully self-explanatory. These are the number of fouls you've committed. These are the number of fouls that you've received from the opposition. And these two columns are your traditional plus-minus analysis. So this is, were you on court when there was a goal scored? And were you on court when there was a goal conceded? On its own, they're a load of rubbish. So for one match, they don't tell you a lot. Over a season, you can pick up patterns, but you could have a bang average player playing with 3 very good players and they do very well. That same bang average player with 3 weak players would struggle in this. This matrix that you will have seen, if you think back to the packing and the packing points, they were awarded for providing passes and for receiving them. So if we look at who's providing those passes and who's receiving it, we can look for hot combinations within the team. So for instance, here we've got Saeed and Gabriel. Although they were actually in different quartets, the quartets were loosely applied. And even though they were in different quartets, Saeed earned 11 points making passes to Gabriel. So that's 11 players that Saeed bypassed with his passes, which Gabriel was on the end of. So that's a combination that works well together. Gabriel is pivot, so you can see that Gabriel gets lots of receiving points. But this is interesting in terms of what it throws up. So here we can see Simone, the goalkeeper, is getting most success passing to Harry receiving from the goalkeeper. That's bypassed 9 players. And what we can also do is not just worry about who's the pass provider and who's the pass receiver, we can combine those. So for instance, Saeed gets 11 points passing to Gabriel, and Gabriel gets 5 points passing to Saeed. So combining those, we can see that there's 16 points here on the Gabriel and Saeed combination, regardless of who's providing and who's receiving those passes. So that's another interesting way of looking at it. So Sully and Gabriel are another hot combination that's coming out. And the final thing to talk about is the difference between absolutes and standardized. So absolutes, these values, these are the absolute values that you've scored based on the fact that, for instance, Harry's been on the court for 29 minutes and 2 seconds. And these are Harry's values for that time. However, if I was, for instance, if I was Gurprit here, I would be saying, well, I've only been on for 11 minutes. I disrupted the ball 4 times. So if I'd have been on as long as some of the other players, I'd have been up in the 8s, 9s, 10s in this number here. So this is where standardized comes in. All of these players have had their values standardized as if they've been on the court for 20 minutes. And Simone, we've left him at 40 minutes because he was the one keeper on the day. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of an overview. Don't forget, you can ask questions, not a problem. Thanks, guys, and see you at training.